welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Twisters, which I really had no idea what I was going to think of this one going into it, but I went to see it in 4DX, and what an experience. Seriously, maybe the movie of all time meant for this particular format, and I had so much fun with it. Joining me to talk about it, someone who also got to see it in 4DX, so we'll definitely talk a little bit more about the format, along with getting into puzzle pieces, of course, for Twisters. But we've got Max Wood from Galaxy of Film joining me. We get into lots of great puzzle pieces here. We have a fun conversation, so that is coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. We got a lot of episodes on the way, so make sure you're subscribed so you get to check them all out as they come out. You can also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and don't forget to join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. So with that said, let's get into this conversation about Twisters. All right, Max Wood is with us to talk about Twisters. How's it going, Max?
Doing great, David. Doing great. How are you doing?
I am great. I'm excited to talk about this one. I wasn't the biggest fan of the original, but we'll get it. Okay. We'll get into that though. But I mean, I really didn't know what to expect going into this, if I would be into it or not. And man, I had such a fun time with this movie, but we'll get into that in a moment. It is your first time on the show. I've been on your show like 100 times, I feel like, so I'm happy to have you here. Tell my listeners a little about you and about the podcast and everything you're up to.
All right, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on here. Like you mentioned, you've been on Galaxy of Film quite a few times. So it's a blast being able to come on here finally as well. And you've been on Galaxy of Film for a long time, not just in terms of quantity, but in terms of like longevity. Like, yeah, you're one of our earlier guest stars as well.
Nice.
Like, I think you came on around like the episode 30 mark, I want to say, and we just hit 180 something this past week.
Wow.
So,
wow.
You know, we're getting up there for sure. But yeah, I'm Max. I'm the host of Galaxy of Film. We are a production company and also a weekly film discussion podcast. We started off just kind of being a platform for film lovers and enthusiasts to kind of discuss about whatever they love or hate, kind of unhinged, because like everything else in the Galaxy, film is also pretty diverse. And we've loved and have a great honor and taking the, all the diverse opinions of films and giving everyone a place to kind of share those judgment-free. So, if you love a film, you hate a film, you can come on and talk about all the love and hate for it, of course. But typically we do discuss 2 films every week together, whether or not they have a direct correlation, like same director, same actor, or sometimes it's just 2 new box office releases that are sharing that week together. Sure. We do have a couple spin-off series as well, like LFG, our bonus content, which is about things that we're so excited to talk about, but they just don't quite make the main show cut that week due to our tight schedule. We have Galaxy of Film Live, which are our live episodes. We do have Awards Bait, which focuses on the awards and Oscar coverage, which you were also on there as well, hosted by Jake. I think you were also the first guest star on Awards Bait, if not mistaken.
I think I was, yeah. I think he started it off with me on there.
Yeah, so we got a lot of stuff going on at Galaxy of Film, a lot more things going in the future as well, too. And then, like I said, we're also a production company. I myself am a director under the brand. I've put out a couple films like A Surgeon, Distinguished, No Vex, and Goonies and Agony, and we have plenty more in the works. So I love doing what I do, love the platform we've been able to create and to give life to, and I'm really happy to be here today with you, man.
Beautiful, beautiful, absolutely. And I'm happy to finally have you on the show. And I just want to say you're much younger than I am, so I think that's a good entry point for Twisters. But like, did you grow up with Twister? Was it like a movie that you saw as a kid?
So, funny enough, I did not grow up watching it. I grew up like seeing clips of it and being in the presence of Twister.
Yeah.
Like every household I went to had a VHS or DVD copy of this thing. All my friends have seen Twister. But it was just something I've never seen up until about a week or 2 ago, gearing up for Twisters, funny enough.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's just in every household I go to. It's in every Goodwill, thrift shop, secondhand store. Everywhere has Twister. down here in North Carolina, which is really crazy. I'd never had a chance to watch it until now.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I'd even been at the Universal experience for it as a kid.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, I was 15 when it came out. And so, I saw it in theaters opening weekend. And I don't remember if I liked it or not, but for whatever reason, I just never returned to it until last week in the lead up to Twisters. And I was like, I got to finally rewatch this thing. And it's honestly just fine. I mean, disaster movies in general, they run the gamut from just awesome, and we'll talk about some of those, I'm sure, as puzzle pieces, to just crap, like really. And Twister was always just right in the middle. It's neither of those two, far ends. And that's why I really just didn't know what to expect with Twisters, whether I would love it or if it would just be more of the same. And it's funny because it is more of the same, but somehow it just all, I think, comes together so well. But part of the reason I think that I loved it so much, and this is part of the reason I wanted to have you as the guest on this episode, is I saw it in 4DX, and I know you did too. And
yes,
tell us a little bit about that experience. Was that your first 4DX experience?
It was.
Yeah.
So I don't talk about this too much on Galaxy of Film, just out of respect for the company. But you know what? I'm going to get a little frisky and tell you guys the inside scoop. I actually do manage a Regal Cinemas out here in Raleigh. And I won't say the location, but there's a couple locations here, and my location does not have any of the special screenings. So we don't get IMAX, 4DX, or ScreenX, unfortunately.
Okay.
Or the Regal X that some theaters get, which is kind of like an off-brand IMAX, if you will.
Sure.
But one theater, which is about 30 minutes out or so, has all three platforms for some reason, all three screenings, which is crazy to me. So I have never seen anything just because it's so out of the way from all the other theaters I go to. Like locally, we also have an Alamo Draft House, which I was a big fan of until they went kind of downhill, in my opinion. And then we have a Marbles Theater, which has the biggest screen in the States. Like all my IMAX experience.
Marbles?
It's independent.
Oh,
It's like a Marbles Kids Museum, and they have this theater. But it's the largest screen in the States. All my IMAXs, I go there, because why wouldn't I experience that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like 12% bigger than a standard IMAX screen.
Nice.
Like it's huge.
Nice.
So I was kind of gearing up for Twisters to be my first 4DX experience. But I was a little bit like discouraged because some of the people I work with had worked at that theater as well. And they were like, oh, well, the water doesn't really work at this 4DX, or some issues with it. And so I kind of went into this knowing like, all right, this is going to be a great experience probably, but not the top notch in terms of 4DX quality standards, I imagine. Other theaters like the one in Manhattan has, which is massive.
Yeah.
But still, man, like I was blown away by it. And so, yeah, the long answer, though, this was my first 4DX experience.
Yeah, it is a very gimmicky thing that has a lot of moving parts that could all go very wrong and be like a real... Because, I mean, honestly, with a regular movie, who the hell wants to be, like, shaken for 2 hours? Like, and shot water and air on and stuff, and the smells and the lights. But for a movie like this, it's almost like custom made for this experience. And so I'm glad you got to see it that way, even if it wasn't like, the perfect environment for the 4DX, but it sounds like you had a lot of fun with it anyway. And by the way, you got to tell Regal to bring back the Coke products, but that's another conversation for another episode. Let's start getting into some puzzle pieces here for Twisters. What do you have for your first piece?
So my first piece, actually, this may be a diss to some people, but like you mentioned, I didn't grow up with the first Twister, and I also think it's just a fine movie. I think the love story is great, but like the disaster aspect of it, it's just kind of fine for me.
Sure.
Like I'm not super interested in meteorology or storm chasing. Like this is cool and all. But like the love stuff really gets with me. The divorced couple coming back together.
Yeah.
But so some of the deaths in the first one, like specifically the opening death with the father being sucked out of the bunker, is kind of comical. Yeah. And in this one, while they do, add a bit more of a dramatic flair to it, there's times where like, and maybe this is just kind of enhanced with the interactive audience we had with the theater too.
Yeah, the 4DX.
But like, yeah, but like the audience particularly, they were so reactive. Like everyone was cheering like it was Endgame. And so when we had deaths in this film, everyone's screaming out, like they're oohing and ahhing, and some of them were kind of funny to me. And I gotta be honest, I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan in the world when it comes to his DC movies. So those deaths reminded me a lot of Clark Kent's dad. His dad being sucked away in the tornado in Man of Steel.
Oh man, I was wondering where you were
Yeah.
going with this, but now that you say it, now that you got there, I was like, all right, I totally get where you're going with this. And yeah, poor Pa Kent or whatever his name is, like putting the hand out and then all of a sudden just gets sucked away. Yeah, the whole Midwest, all the weeds and all that stuff out there. Yeah, it's painting a picture absolutely of that sequence, and I think it's a great one. I think that's awesome. That's a really fun one to kick us off with. I will go with, you know what, I'm going to go to just kind of a random one. There's some obvious ones I think we'll get into, but I'm going to go to more of a random one, and it has to do with that setting that all of this is in, and I'm going to go with A Quiet Place because of the whole small town aspect. Like, my favorite thing about the Quiet Place movies, aside from the whole hook of these creatures that anything they hear they go and just absolutely destroy, I love that they're set in this small town, and that we get to see this small little town with its it's a movie theater and it's baseball stadium. In this one it's a rodeo, and like you get to see that small little street just getting destroyed, and like everybody's kind of coming together trying to save each other as everything is like hitting the fan. And so that small town setting definitely reminded me a lot of A Quiet Place, and I still haven't seen the new one. I do need to go get out to the theater and see that.
I saw the new one in the Regal X screen, and I'm very ashamed to admit this. I fell asleep almost immediately through the entire
There's the review.
movie.
Is that a Bespin or where does that fall on your Galaxy of Film scale when you fall asleep?
That's not even on the plane again. That's an escape pod for all I'm concerned. I got to rewatch that one.
Okay, fair enough. Well, what do you got for your next piece?
Yeah. So man, this one, you mentioned small town, and I don't want to say this is too much of a spoiler for this film, but there is an act in this film that involves a movie theater, of course, like you just mentioned. And I was telling my employees at work who were asking if they should see this in 4DX. I'm like, absolutely, because like this movie was kind of made for us working at a theater.
100%.
Like, you'll love this film for that. However, I could not help but think to myself, this reminds me of a little Disney movie called Halloweentown, because the third act in that movie has Calabar, who is like he's the antagonist. He's like this whole anti-Halloween, I want to suck the life out of you kind of thing, and he looks like an off-brand Emperor Palpatine. Nice. It's ridiculous, but he's doing all this in a movie theater, and the screen transforms and looks like a massive like cyclone, where he just kind of fades in and out of it, almost like a Power Rangers-esque kind of look. It's ridiculous. But the entire time I'm seeing this sequence go down in the movie theater in Twisters, I'm just like, are we going to see like the Palpatine face come through from Halloweentown?
That would be amazing.
It was awesome.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
One of the early piecing it together episodes was on a movie called The Hurricane Heist, which not a lot of people really saw back when it came out in 2008, but it's about a bank heist that happens during a hurricane, and it's as ridiculous as it sounds, but there's one scene where for no reason whatsoever there is like an evil face in the hurricane, and it's just like, it's incredible. Like, wow, they really went there. But that I'm not going to bring up The Hurricane Heist as a puzzle piece here, but Halloweentown, I've never seen that. I've never even heard of that. That sounds like really fun and charming.
Gosh.
Like, it just sounds silly.
Debbie Reynolds is like the witchy grandmother who has the ability to go back and forth to Halloweentown. It's a made-for-TV Disney movie. Okay. But I love it. Like, Judith Hoag is the mother from Ninja Turtles.
Nice.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, the main protagonist, her and like the love interest from either the second or third one, like are actually married after the film's ended too.
Okay.
So yeah, those were a huge part of my childhood for sure.
Right on. Yeah, I'm going to have to check that out one of these days. And we will get into spoilers here as we're going through these pieces. I'm going to just, since you're talking about the movie theater scene, I'm going to continue on the movie theater scene because that is one of my favorite sequences of the year so far. Obviously I'm a big movie theater fan. I am a purist of that's the best way to see a movie. And so that whole sequence clearly comes from a place of love of movie theaters. And so I think Halloweentown's a great one to include here. I'm going to go to 1985's Demons from Lamberto Bava. It's a zombie movie that takes place in
a movie theater, and comes right through the screen, and the zombies are right there in the movie theater, and it is just pure zombie horror comedy fun, and just total splatterfest, and just an awesome 80s zombie movie. At the whole movie theater sequence, I mean, the whole movie Demons takes place in the theater. I think you could totally have set an entire Twister, attack in the whole movie beginning to end in a theater. It would have worked, but I'm happy we get everything else that we get in the movie too. But that whole sequence is just so damn fun, and I had to bring it back to Demons for that one.
I need to check that out. That sounds fun, actually.
Oh, it's absolutely nutty. Definitely watch that. But what do you got for your next one?
So this next one might be a little bit of a stretch, but it's funny you mentioned zombies. So this one isn't necessarily like disaster or tornado oriented whatsoever, but more so because of the theater experience I had. Because I also agree, I'm a theater purist. That's why I manage a theater at this point too. But this movie came out, I think, on my 19th birthday. I saw it opening night on my birthday in IMAX, and I remember the first 15 minutes of this thing was worth the price of admission alone. And that movie is called Overlord, which is like a Nazi zombie film. I think JJ produced it or executive produced it. But it reminded me a little bit of Twisters, or Twister reminded me of that in a bit of a sense, where it's like, this is an experience. Like, you're not only fully captivated in the story and the visuals, but like the walls around you are non-existent. They're dark.
Sure.
You are in this world. And Overlord, especially in IMAX, had like this, like, I don't want to call it sensory overload, because now experiencing 40X, that's almost what that is.
Really, that, yeah.
But Overlord in IMAX was the closest thing to like a sensory overload, Jesus, that I could experience compared to a 40X experience.
No, I love that. I love that movie. It's great. We covered that back in the first year of piecing it together, actually. But this movie, Twisters, part of what I love about it so much is that it is a just kind of go for broke movie. It is just like throw everything at the screen, let's have a good time movie. And I think Overlord definitely is one of those. And that's why I really like that movie too. I'm glad you brought that one up. That's definitely a fun one to include here. We got to get some disaster movies in here. So I'm going to go to Independence Day, which is the best disaster movie, and came out in 96 at the same time as Twister, and I think completely overshadowed it. I feel like Twisters almost in a way learns from the lessons of Independence Day and how much better it was. It's got the better characters. They all kind of come together. They go on their little side adventures and then come back together. You've got like all the science stuff that you could root for from beginning to end, like trying to figure out if these experiments are going to work, and then they do kind of work out, and the good guys always win. It's all about the good guys overcoming just this complete insanity. And I feel like, there's a lot of great disaster movies. There's a lot of bad ones, like I said earlier, but Independence Day is just the top of the list, and you got to get some influence from that.
Funny enough, I also just watched that for the first time recently too.
Yeah.
And again, the same households that had Twister on VHS always had Independence Day like right next to it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned that one specifically.
That was opening weekend. I've said this before on this podcast, but opening weekend for Independence Day is and will always be my favorite movie theater experience. It was just the most fun I've ever had. 15-year-old me, and an oversold theater. Back then you could do that in the 90s, no worry about anybody getting in trouble or anything. We were sitting in the aisles and just everybody cheering at everything that was happening in that movie. It was so much fun. But let's go on to another piece. What do you got?
So, like you said, bringing it back to disaster stuff. This is a disaster film in a way. And I guess I could say that about this entire franchise, series, or even just the genre of this in general, but specifically this movie, that is Shin Godzilla. This is something I also watched for the first time recently this year. And of course, Godzilla films are disaster films on their own, but like Twisters, what really makes Twisters interesting to me compared to the first film is that the Twisters have a bit more personality. They are a kaiju almost, or just the natural kaiju instead of breathing atomic breath. That means screaming. What's really cool as well is like Shin Godzilla, where we are seeing, the government and all these different agencies attempt all these different methods to stop these different forms of Godzilla. We're kind of seeing these, natural disaster like agency, I forget what they call the 3 satellite agency in Twisters off the top of my head, going against Glen Powell's group. But we're seeing different methods of that being implemented. And of course, whenever we're seeing our protagonist join over with Glen Powell's group, we're then seeing this weird, unapproved method to stop the Twisters. And we're having to take that scientific risk, which is really cool, which is what we also see in Shin Godzilla with the whole massive train bombing situation, where they're just launching trains at Godzilla as they freeze them.
Yeah.
So I thought that was the biggest disaster kind of connection, but also the kaiju stuff is just so cool. This entire time I'm afraid looking at these tornadoes, especially after the opening sequence. It's horrifying. The first movie, it's all right, it's believable. I get tornadoes happen. It's comical almost. I'm seeing from Wizard of Oz, tornadoes sweep Dorothy away. Sure. We're making the Dorothy jokes in this thing.
Yeah.
And this one, it's right off the bat ripping characters out from under a bridge, and it's brutal.
Yeah.
Shin Godzilla was a big one for me.
Yeah, it is brutal, and in a lot of the Godzilla movies, you see just the incompetence of the government and how they just don't know how to deal with any of this stuff, and we have to count on the little guys to figure out some solution to everything going on. So I think that's a great one. I actually saw Godzilla -1 in 4DX. That was a lot of fun. I've only seen maybe 4 or 5 movies in 4DX, and obviously it's not something you want to do for every movie, but once in a while, especially something disaster related, it's absolutely a blast. But yeah, good one.
I'm glad you mentioned that real quick though. It blows my mind that a movie like this is being pulled out of 4DX after just 1 week for Deadpool Wolverine. Ugh. It really does.
Yeah, it's very upsetting. I said on Twitter I would go every 6 months to see this movie in 4DX. It's just like a complete roller coaster ride. So yeah,
it truly is. I 100% agree with that.
Bummer. Well, I'm gonna go with another obvious one and go with Top Gun Maverick. I didn't even realize at first that Joseph Kosinski, the director of Top Gun Maverick, wrote the story here. But it makes so much sense in retrospect because, he is perfect when it comes to incorporating a classic 80s movie, in this case 90s, and kind of taking what worked, leaving behind what didn't, and updating it, and introducing new characters, but everybody just feels like they come right out of that same world that the original came out of. And Glen Powell, we got to talk about him a bunch here. He's so damn good in this movie and so likable. And, he's having a huge year. Everything he's been doing lately, Hitman, Anyone But You, both doing great. This, a big hit. We're going to keep seeing him being just this huge star. And I think that all, he was around for a good, 8 years or something. He was in little things here and there, but Top Gun Maverick was, it was the introduction to the world at large of who he is. And he was stealing scenes from Tom Cruise, the ultimate, movie star. And it just goes to show how good he is. And he just absolutely kills it here. Every scene with him is just electric, and he's so funny, and he is just so likable and charming and just fun to watch in this movie. And that just brings it right back to how good he was in Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, I need to rewatch Top Gun Maverick, because funny enough, I'm not a massive Glen Powell fan. I feel like it's almost like, I don't want to call it a level of jealousy, but I haven't seen that role where everyone's praising him for so much. Top Gun Maverick's great in its own. It's a masterpiece. In my opinion, Top Gun Maverick is the current greatest legacy sequel we've gotten. It beats Force Awakens out for sure. And that's a heavy statement for me being a massive Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
But I don't know. After watching Anyone But You, he was kind of the weaker point in that film for me, and I love rom-coms. And then I skipped Hitman, unfortunately, just because I wasn't a big fan of his role in Anyone But You. But I was really, I was sold on him after watching Twisters, for sure.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me to my last puzzle piece as well that I have, is you mentioned, he's very electrifying and in a way captivating in this. And I'm glad that it wasn't just a pure lust romantic level form, because I was kind of expecting that. because I feel like Glen Powell's been a lot like typecasted a bit, which is fine in its own right. You know, women need eye candy too, and you know anyone who wants men to need eye candy to agree. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like it's fine, but like I want to see them break out of that eye candy role. And that's kind of like my same critiques going with his co-star from Anyone But You, Sydney Sweeney. Like, I love Sydney Sweeney. I love Euphoria. Seeing her in Immaculate was incredible for me. Because I'm not just having to see her tits the whole movie, finally. You know, I want to see her break out of that a bit more.
Yeah.
So Twisters definitely was that for me. But was really funny. And like I said, my last puzzle piece was the fireworks bit where he's launching things out. It reminds me so much of Jackass. The entire series, the movies in general.
Yeah.
It is such like a Johnny Knoxville thing for him to go back and forth doing. His entire like tornado chasing rig, the car drilling the massive drill spikes into the ground, the rockets back and forth. It's hilarious, in my opinion. Like, it's so over the top. I loved it. It just reminded me of a massive, just Johnny Knoxville situation that's going to go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Going into a tornado.
Absolutely,
Launch fireworks.
You're wondering how is he going to get hurt, because there's no way he's not going to get hurt. But it's a big popcorn blockbuster movie, so he doesn't get hurt. But I love that. I think that there's so much of that here. And also the fact that his character is a YouTuber kind of lends itself to that as well, to like just, you know, creating whatever content, quote unquote, is going to, you know, get the attention of people on social media and all that kind of stuff. And his character is just like a complete ass, really, but he plays it so well that it's like really fun. And you saying that you weren't really a big fan of his necessarily going into this, I do feel like, as much as I have been on the Glen Powell train ever since Top Gun Maverick, I feel like a lot of people are in your boat too, where, you know, they're just not quite sold on him yet. But ever since Maverick, I've just been on board, and this just cemented it. And glad to hear that you enjoyed him in this. But yeah, definitely Jackass is a great one to include here. I've got two more I want to bring up.
Okay.
First of all, I wanted to bring up Interstellar. And you could maybe go with another, there's probably maybe an even better version of this, but specifically when the one friend played by Anthony Ramos is showing how the tornado tracker works and is using a glass of water with the salt and pepper shakers. It reminded me of like when he's like showing how a wormhole works in Interstellar and like using common household items, you know. I know there's a better version of that. I was also thinking of the Phil Hartman, Bill Clinton warlord sketch on Saturday Night Live, where he's with the cheeseburger at McDonald's. But, you know, some version of that, I was trying to think of like the best version of that. So that was one. And then another one, we just had Furiosa this year, which is still my favorite movie of the year so far. But I wanted to go back to the original Mad Max movies. The Australian outback, definitely a different kind of setting, but it kind of fits in with this Oklahoma Wild West kind of setting. And all these people just like driving with like no rules, cutting each other off, like flailing all over the place. This movie, as much as it's a disaster movie, it's a tornado movie, it's also a car movie. Like, these cars are just all over the place. You could even maybe go Fast and Furious with it. That's how much the cars play into everything. So, I just wanted to throw that one in there too. But, yeah.
That's a solid one.
Right on.
I do. I agree with Mad Max on that. That's crazy. Especially when they're getting ready, I think, to chase their first tornado going against Glen Powell's team, and they just cuts them right off in traffic.
Yeah.
On that side road. That's beautiful.
Beautiful stuff. That is that goes into Jackass as well, I think. But I'll read down our list of puzzle pieces, then we'll get into some closing thoughts here. We talked about Man of Steel, A Quiet Place, Halloweentown, Demons, Overlord, Independence Day, Shin Godzilla, Top Gun Maverick, Jackass, Interstellar, and Mad Max. Lots of really just all over the place stuff. At first I thought this might just be an episode where we're naming disaster movies, but we kind of went all over the place here. I also wanted to just give a shout to the director Lee Isaac Chung's previous film Minari, which is a fantastic little film, and
so good.
I wonder if a little bit of influence there, where he's shooting that movie that was in Arkansas, a similar kind of setting, and he's like, this is like this quiet little movie. What if I do the exact opposite thing in the same setting? And then came up with, let's do a Twister remake. I wonder if that possibly happened.
Oh, I don't know. Minari is very underrated as well. I remember pre-ordering that on Blu-ray, I think, from like Best Buy or something. I watched it like when it immediately came out to physical release. Minari's great.
Great movie. One of my favorite scores of the last few years. Incredible score. But let's get into some closing thoughts. I feel like we should start off with the soundtrack. I don't know if you're into country at all, but this movie is just nonstop country songs.
Yeah, the soundtrack is actually like my one issue with this movie. I'm not into country pop music. This may sound shocking coming from someone who's born and raised in North Carolina. I'm a big hip hop guy and anything but country music. The only country music I like is like Johnny Cash, some George Strait, like some classic stuff.
Yeah,
but like the country pop like era genre of country, I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, I'm basically with you. I think there were some songs on here that I was liking, like mainly like the girl stuff. Like I think the girl country singers were pretty good on the soundtrack. But when it gets like really it's funny because like I also like hip hop, but like the country stuff that gets the big influence from hip hop, that stuff is just the worst. It's just unbelievably bad, and
it really
there's a lot of that in here. So yeah, I'm with you there. But any other closing thoughts? Anything else you want to mention that we didn't quite get into while doing puzzle pieces?
From just my closing thoughts for this thing is that this really is a summer masterpiece. I probably wasn't going to give this movie a chance until I was working in a movie theater and all my coworkers were kind of talking about this. And I was like, nah, like you really gotta watch Twister. Like it's a decent movie. Like you're gonna love Twisters, dude. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I might see it. Like whatever. I've got free movies here. I might skip a day out and go see it. This is an experience. This has quickly become one of my favorite movies of the year. I definitely think this will be underrated, not in terms of box office numbers or like on a Furiosa standpoint where people probably didn't see this right away. I'll see it when it comes to streaming. But like, I just think this will get swept under the rug to a degree later on the road. This is something you need to experience in order to really appreciate. Like, watching this on a regular screen is something I can only imagine. Like, yeah, you might like it. But seeing it in 40X, seeing it in IMAX, even ScreenX, which I haven't experienced myself, like you gotta see and go with like the extra mile to watch this on a different kind of viewing standpoint. Like, this is an experience kind of film.
Yeah,
truly.
I'm with you. Yeah, that theater was so much fun. Everybody just screaming and laughing, and it was just just a great time. And so I'm totally with you there. And only other thing I wanted to mention, we talked Glen Powell a bunch. We mentioned Anthony Ramos. Daisy Edgar-Jones, good. I think she's a solid lead. Katy O'Brien was in there. David Corenswet's going to be the new Superman. He was kind of the asshole guy. An interesting mix of people here. I think everybody, there's no Philip Seymour Hoffman in this cast, but I think everybody did their job,
I forget her last name, Sasha something. She's
Sasha
the drone
Lane.
flyer, but
Yeah.
Sasha Lane. She's great in American Honey.
Oh,
I was so happy to see her in this movie.
Yep.
It really was.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up Twisters. Max, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Oh goodness, let me take a look at my letterbox real quick,
Sure.
David. I've been watching so much getting ready for this convention this week, and it's crazy.
Nice.
Yeah, let's go ahead, and this might be a hot take for some people. Bad Boys Ride or Die is probably like my favorite movie of the year so far.
Nice.
We also just talked about this on our Patreon episode we recorded this afternoon as well. I love the Bad Boys movies, and I think there's some of Michael Bay's finest work if you enjoy corny Michael Bay explosions. However, Bad Boys for Life kind of took it a step above for me. Bad Boys Ride or Die took it a step further. I loved this movie to death.
Yeah.
The cinematography and camera work is top notch, not only in terms of framing, but it's creative.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Like it's insane. Some of the snorri cam work is some of my favorite things I've seen in a movie in recent years, period. The character roles and development for Martin Lawrence and Will Smith are great in this. It gets meta at times. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, and it works with that towards its advantage. And it has a decent soundtrack too. I really enjoyed Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Yeah.
So I recommend that one for sure.
I'm with you. I loved it. And by the way, like just as a quick tangent, but what a year for superhero movie blockbusters, because that movie did great in the box office. This that we're talking about, Twisters, did great. Godzilla X Kong did really, really well. I mean,
Inside Out.
yeah, Inside Out 2 is doing incredible, biggest movie of the year. I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see, and hopefully it'll continue as we continue on in the summer. But yeah, Bad Boys Ride or Die rules. But yeah, let's hear some more about what you got going on over on Galaxy of Film and your films.
Oh yeah, so you can check out all of our stuff at galaxyfilm.com. Our YouTube channel is Galaxy Film Productions. This summer, I recently released a film called Goonies in Agony, which is a story of two young men going through their own forms of depression and their coping mechanisms. You can check that out. We've got some great cast members on there. Also, funny enough, because we're talking about movies growing up in childhood, one of the main actors, Nigel Morgan, I went to high school with, actually. So it's a great honor to kind of like have my career grow up alongside his acting career too.
Nice.
He's been in most of my stuff so far, actually. So check out Goonies in Agony. Love that film. It's been an absolute blast being able to kind of carry that through post-production and now since it's been released. We got a few more films we're working on this summer. I'm getting ready to start shooting or resume filming a film called which is a cooking film inspired by Ratatouille and Hulu's The Bear.
Nice.
And then also we're working on a horror film called Pretty Hurts, which is the first horror film I've worked on. So that's be a lot of fun.
Nice.
But as far as the podcast goes, we still got plenty of plans to keep going on weekly. We've had a lot of special guest stars coming on this past summer, such as like Greg Sestero from The Room, David Mickey Evans, who directed The Sandlot. We just had Nalini Christian, who was in Attack the Clones as Barriss Offee, one of the Jedi in the Battle of Geonosis, if you're into Star Wars. So yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on. Always a lot more coming in the future, both films and podcast-wise. So check it all out at galaxyfilm.com.
Awesome. Well, Max, it was great having you here, and hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me on, David. It's been an absolute pleasure. This has been something I've wanted to do for quite some time. I've loved working with you on our podcast as well. So it's been a huge honor to come on here and talk Twisters of all things, too.
Absolutely.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Twisters. Thank you to Max Wood for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure you are subscribed wherever it is that you listen, and maybe drop us a little 5-star rating and review. It helps make sure that more people check out the show. I gotta tell you, this month has been the biggest month as far as new listeners are concerned that we've had all year. So lots of new listeners out there. If you're out there, first of all, I really appreciate it. Second of all, make sure you're subscribed. Third of all, drop that 5-star rating. And remember, you can follow us on social media at PiecingPod. Join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. And I'd love to hear from you if you have some puzzle pieces for one of the episodes that you listen to. And if you think, I can't believe those guys didn't mention this one movie that this movie totally must have been inspired by, send them in. I will read them on the next trailer episode. Plus, I just love hearing from you all. So do get in touch. I would love to hear from you. We also have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there. I'm currently prepping some exclusive music for it. We have a brand new Awesome Movie Year bonus episode hitting next week at the time of this recording. And, of course, lots of early access to Piecing It Together episodes and exclusive video versions of some episodes. So check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. I definitely appreciate you just being out there listening to the podcast. But if you want to support the show, that is also very much appreciated. So I always close these episodes out with a piece of my music, and I like to try to find a track of mine that fits the theme of the movie. And I got a perfect one today because as part of my 24 for 2024 series of music that I am releasing this year, which for those of you that are new and don't know, I'm releasing a new single on the first and third Friday of every month of the entire year. That's 24 new songs coming out this year. One of those tracks is called Eye of the Storm. So, I mean, come on. Perfect fit here. So let's play Eye of the Storm. It's part of the 24 for 2024 series. You can find the playlist of that series on Spotify, and all 24 songs will be on Spotify, Apple Music, all of the streaming services that you can listen to music on throughout the year. But this one's Eye of the Storm. Hope you enjoy it. We'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.